Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I'm joined by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And I'm Brian Black. Today, we are going to talk about skills. So, I often get asked, what's ITS? What do you guys do? And it's really confusing sometimes, even to me. I mean, going on 10 years now we've been doing this. It's still hard for me to articulate what we do into someone that has no clue what any of this is about.
Yep.
So I really feel like knowledge and tools is the most broad way that I can say what we do. And also Imminent Threat Solutions, which ITS stands for, is also a great descriptor for what we do as well. It's the threats that are around us every day. Even though threat has a somewhat negative connotation to some people, I do feel like threats come at you from every which way every day. They aren't necessarily called the word threat, but however, they are a threat to what you're doing. You know, can you not get through when you're driving on that road? That's a threat. I can't get where I'm going. It's threatening to my perceived time that I'm supposed to be there. So
I was going to say, sometimes they come from within.
yes,
Sometimes it's you.
Sometimes you can threaten yourself.
It is.
Yeah. But so I wanted to really just kind of break that down a little bit today and talk about kind of the main skill sets, if you will, or knowledge and products that we kind of support too, because I feel like they kind of tie in, and I've always tried to do that as we've developed the company, is that when we were just writing articles in the very beginning, it was just me sitting in my home office back in 2009, I really started writing about skills that I felt were important that were often neglected for people to work on. And now, you know, I almost feel like there's almost a whole industry around that type of knowledge transfer. And, you know, now thanks to YouTube, and YouTube's always been around since I started the company, but however, YouTube's really become more of a source and a resource for things like that nowadays. Yeah. So I really kind of started talking to Rob about this too, is I want to really focus on probably 8 skill sets, if you will, that I think are fundamental aspects of our company. So if most people haven't heard this before. I mean, if you've been to a muster, we, you know, do musters every year. It's kind of a gathering of our members, and we go over skill set information. We bring in subject matter experts, and we learn. And that's really what we've always tried to do with the site and with our products as well. So the things that we do sell in the store really support and are important to the skill sets we advocate. So, you know, just, you know, starting from something that I first wrote about, I think it was our very first article on ITS, it was knot tying. So that's something that many people don't know how to do, yet it's something that everyone needs at some point in their life. You know, whether you're tying down a load in the back of your truck.
I was going to say, like,
you know,
bringing something home from the store.
Yeah. You know, I mean, even if you did it once a year when you tie down the Christmas tree onto the car, you know, like not having to rely on somebody at Home Depot to help you tie something down is important. And, you know, the old adage of, you know, if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. I mean, that does really come into play. Everyone knows how to do an overhand knot because they've been tying their shoes for forever.
Yeah.
However, if you just do a bunch of those, it's not really that secure, and it can come
Well,
out,
why not do it the right way?
Correct.
I mean, that could be said for everything. You know, if you're going to do something, do it the right way. So if you're going to tie a knot, why don't you just... And it doesn't take that much time to learn something like that. I mean, we've talked before about the top 5 knots to know, or like 3 knots that you should know, and they just get committed to memory, and then you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and, you know, like we were talking earlier, Rob and I were just kind of chatting about this and brainstorming this episode beforehand, and, you know, we mentioned, you know, it'd be great to know the types of rope, and and it's true. I mean, there's so many types of rope out there that it's tough to know, you know, is this the right kind of rope to do what I'm after? Like if I'm going to lash this thing together, you know, is there a specific rope to use? Absolutely, there really is, because there's a type of spar or beam or whatever to use when you're trying to lash things together, if you're trying to build a structure. So, yeah, I mean, natural fiber rope and actual pieces of wood are really what you need to make that structure secure and strong. So it's things like that I feel are often overlooked in that skill and that discipline in itself. And I really do feel like that's its own broad topic because so many people could use that information and not many people practice it.
Yeah.
So
it's an underutilized.
Yeah. And then just to kind of give you a run through of the 8 we're going to talk about, we've got knot tying, fire building or outdoor skills, got navigation, organization, which we'll get into, and it's not just about how to organize your sock drawer. Home security, first aid is a big one, first aid and trauma. You've got kind of fitness and nutrition, and then protection, which I feel is a pretty big, all-encompassing category that fits in things like responding to natural disasters or how to evacuate in something like that. Also, self-defense falls into that category as well. So that's kind of where we're headed with a little bit of this. And I'm not going to get too far into these topics. I just wanted to really discuss why we talk about what we do and what kind of the why behind it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the next is fire building, and the reason that I like to focus on that is, not only am I really passionate about these skills, which is why ITS got started in the first place, but I really practice what I preach too. Like, there's not a time that I'm outside that I'm not, and I don't mean in the backyard. I mean,
so you're about to sound like a pyro. You're like, anytime I'm outside, I'm thinking about starting fires.
I did almost burn down a fence when I was little because I was playing with a stupid lighter, but yeah. If you've listened to our ridiculous podcast, ridiculous dialogue podcast, you've really a ridiculous podcast.
Yeah. I mean, both.
Listen to that. You'll have heard my story in the very beginning. But anyway, so I think a lot of people understand that fire is important to stay warm and to cook with and things like that. And when they're in an outdoor environment, camping or what have you, I think a lot of people want to know how to build a fire, but they just haven't taken the time to learn how to do it and to practice it and learn about the fire pyramid and the fire triangle and things like that. So
I think there are people out there that are thinking like, is it really that important? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, it
when
is.
you are stranded or alone or whatever at night and it's cold, fire is like,
well, put it
best.
this way. And, just to say, yes, it's important is sometimes not enough to people. Like, let me put it this way. I can get a fire going with wet wood.
Yeah.
Because anything will burn if it's hot enough. And that's really the concept behind it, is that you'll know how to do that in any kind of circumstance.
Well, and you can also adapt to, if you know the basics of how fire works, then you can troubleshoot problems with what you're having. Like you said, if it doesn't have enough ventilation, okay, well, how do we get that ventilation? And you can work the problem rather than just staring at it and going, it's not working like it did last time.
Yeah. And I mean, even outdoor skills fall under this kind of concept too, under this skill. I mean, knowing how to gather water the correct way and how to purify it and things like that. Those are really important things too, and often neglected, and people don't think about it. They just buy some off-the-shelf water filter from REI. They have no clue how to use it or what it's for or what's the difference between protozoa and cryptosporidia and all those catchword buzzwords that they hear about. Does your filtration system account for viruses? Because that's a big thing too.
I have a water filter in my pack. Okay, cool. What does it filter?
Yeah. Have you used it before?
It filters water.
Well, and that's what a lot of this stems around too. It's doing the work on the front end to have the confidence in the back end when something happens.
Right.
It's the whole, you default and fall to your lowest level of training, in a situation,
Yeah.
You don't rise to adversity, you fall back to your lowest level of training. However that quote goes, I can never remember the whole thing.
Something like that.
Yeah. You get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you got navigation, which I think is super important because, again, it goes back to that confidence thing. Like, if you know how to use a map and compass, which everyone's like, I just use my GPS. Great. Well, do you know how to use that GPS? Do you understand what those things are that you're creating? Do you understand that those coordinates actually mean something? Like, do you know what datum you're using? Do you understand? So it all ties together, and it's almost like, I'm trying to relate this to, like a basic skill that translates into something we use every day.
I was going to say, I think navigation is probably one of the most empowering skills.
Yeah.
Because I have like a top 10 moments in my head of like amazing points in life, and finding an orange tip stick in the middle of the night in the woods has got to be up there with like,
there you go.
I got here off paper, like
Start from the bottom. Now we're here.
It is. It's like, because it lets you start to, like I said, work the problem of like, I'm lost. Well, not lost. I have a map. Okay, well, let's find out where we are on the map so that we can get to where we want to go on the map. And it's just, it breaks down the complicated nature of what you think is navigation, because it's a lot easier once you understand the principles, and it becomes not as daunting of a thing of like, oh man, I would just be plumb useless. That's what a lot of people will tell you when you talk about navigation. It's like, well, you don't have to be like that.
Yeah, I mean, in the points in your life where you're actually going to have to fall back to that skill and utilize it are probably really low on the list, unless you're doing something like like an event with the scouts, and you're using a compass and a map to find those different checkpoints, like an orienteering type thing. But something that pops into my mind is that situation where I think it was an Asian family, and they were in a station wagon or some kind of Volvo vehicle like that. They got lost. They pulled over. They didn't know where they were at. They were in a mountainous area. They were just going to see the sights. The car broke down. No communications available, and the guy leaves his family and starts to walk away from the car, and winds up getting lost in the woods and dying from exposure, and his wife and child eventually get found and are safe. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, just knowing that, hey, I'm going to go out. First of all, I wouldn't leave the vehicle. But second of all, knowing that, hey, I've got a compass in my hand. I know where I'm going. I'm pace counting as I'm going. I know I'm going to get back there. I mean, it's almost like it's invisible breadcrumbs is a way to look at navigation.
Very true.
Like, I know where I'm going and I know where I came from. So if I need to get back there, I know how to get back there.
Well, and if he would have practiced or been in a real world environment to know navigation, you would know how easy it is to get lost.
Yeah.
Because, we had a situation at muster. I jumped out of a vehicle in the dark without setting a waypoint on a GPS. I had no map. And you think, oh, I know where the vehicle is. And then you go a quarter mile away and you're like, I have no idea where anything is.
Yeah.
I'm completely turned around.
For some reason, everything looks the same.
Right. And it doesn't matter if it's light or dark or cold or hot. It doesn't matter. You can get lost in a couple of seconds. So had he practiced that or whatever, you would know, let's just stay with the vehicle.
Yeah.
You could navigate back if you needed to, but what's the important part? Let's stay with the thing that people are probably going to find.
Agreed. And then we get into like organization, and organization, like we mentioned earlier, isn't about your closet or your sock drawer. However, it's important too. I mean, productivity revolves around being organized, in my opinion. And I find that the more organized I am, the more productive I am too. It's kind of a double-edged sword with that. So it also means the gear that holds everything too. So bags and pockets and pouches and things like that. And, what do you use for that? How do you carry that on a regular basis? What backpack is best? Do you really know what you're putting your stuff into? Is it the best way to do it? Do you put it in some cavernous bag and now you got to dig through it for 10 minutes to find what you're looking for? Or do you have sub bags that you use to find those higher level items that you need? So
make it more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what the key is to that, is its efficiency. Are you carrying it the right way? Are you carrying it the best way to avoid undue stress to your knees or, things like that. So that really kind of all ties together in that, in my opinion.
Yep.
And then you got home security, which is a huge one for me. I've just become this lifelong student of home security, and I'm always trying to find out what the latest and greatest ways to protect my home and my family are. And it really started with my interest in lockpicking. So I got taught that skill actually, it goes even further back. I think I got my first lockpicking kit when I was 12 years old from a spy shop. My grandfather took me in there and bought me one with a little booklet. And I never really understood fully what I was doing with it. I always kind of kept the kit in the book and thought,
just like poking it a lot.
Yeah. I really never understood the concept. And then when one of my buddies in the military taught me like how to pick a padlock, I was just blown away. I was like, oh my God, that's what I've been doing wrong this whole time.
Right.
So even though I had a book on how to do it, it really wasn't until I did that it clicked. And then I kind of found Locksport, and there's a whole group around that really just all they're trying to do is defeat a lock and find out the vulnerabilities to it, because in essence what you're doing with that is you're finding out what's secure and what's not secure. And if you know that, you can better protect your home and your family and things like that. So it's not really about the nefariousness of lockpicking, like, oh, I can get into any building or any padlock if I want to. That's not what it's about. Right. And really, there's a code of ethics behind Locksport, which is you don't pick anything you don't have permission to pick.
Well, and so like prior to you seeing a padlock get picked, how much faith did you have in a padlock?
Tons.
Exactly.
Other than like a sledgehammer
right.
knocking it off.
And then you
or
see
something.
it get picked and you're like, oh man, I'm not putting that on anything.
Yeah.
It just completely takes away this veil that you have in front of you of like, oh, my deadbolt will hold them back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no. Someone competent is in a deadbolt in a couple seconds.
Yeah, or you at least have contingencies put in place because you know that's not the be-all, end-all of
Right.
your security plan.
It helps you layer up.
Right. So, and really, I think lockpicking ties into that too because it's one of those sub-skills that you can learn that makes the home security aspect of that even more powerful.
Yeah, it's also super fun.
Yeah, it's also a great way to spend time and very frustrating at times when you can't pick open a lock that you're trying to do, that you have permission to, or you own.
Of course.
And then there's first aid, which is a huge one with me too. I think from the very start of ITS in 2009, I was always focused on that because I've always had an interest in the medical field. I did a little medical stuff in the military, so it kind of helped me see the need for that. And I mean, we were some of the probably one of the first companies around in our industry to start selling vacuum sealed trauma kits. So I saw that the military had this kind of stuff. Why shouldn't civilians be prepared with that kind of stuff too? And it's a step beyond the first aid kit, and I see a huge difference between those two phrases. However, first aid is a more all-encompassing way to describe what we're trying to do,
and it
which
totally
is saving
fits.
somebody.
It's the first aid you give.
Yeah.
If it's a gunshot
exactly.
wound, you're going to need a trauma kit.
Yeah.
But it's still the first aid you give.
Yeah, and trauma kit's really a more descriptive way of saying this is specifically designed to treat the large format injuries that you receive during a gunshot wound or a huge traffic accident. It's the same context. It's some kind of traumatic incident.
Yeah, and you'll just know what kit to grab because you followed our previous step, which was organization, to organize your first aid kit.
And
versus
right
your
where it
trauma
is
kit.
or where to tell someone to go get it from.
Boom.
Yeah. So, and then, the other one is fitness and nutrition, which I've always tried to be an example of that my whole life. I didn't really get those things on point until, the nutrition aspect, I really didn't understand and get it together until a year and a half ago, till I finally lost some weight and realized what I was doing with eating, which, I'm sure we've talked about before in other podcasts and stuff like that too. But the fitness aspect is something that I didn't pay attention to either until I wanted to go in the military. And then I was just drilling that into my head all the time, which, just like we talked about earlier with the skill preparing you for the confidence in being able to do those things if an emergency happened, it's the same thing with fitness. Like, fitness is what helped me be able to get through some of those challenging things in the military, like Hell Week and things like that, is because I had the backbone of fitness and it made me know that I could do it and therefore gave me the confidence. Because they say, that kind of training at Buds is 90% mental, and it really is, because it's your mind telling you you can do this because you've done it before. And the more that you can do that with any kind of skill, I think it translates into everything.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's an important part of what I think we stand for, what I know we stand for as a company too. And then protection is a pretty big all-encompassing skill, in my opinion. And even though it's a skill set and a category, it's still... it ties in things like we talked about earlier with natural disasters. So, what are you going to do in that situation? How are you going to prepare to save your family or evacuate? Or, how are you going to respond to someone saying, "Give me your money" on the street? I mean, it's just, there's so many implications
Or even
of that.
stuff like shelter building.
Yes.
You get out.
Exactly.
Just protect yourself.
Yeah, and again, if you're stranded and you don't know what to do and your car's not providing you the warmth that you need, can you build something on your own to help insulate yourself?
Because I think there is this thought, especially when I talk to people who aren't familiar with what we do, of like, I'm going to be driving down the road one day in the snow and my car's going to break down and I'm going to like ruck up and just immediately leave No, like just because you have the knowledge and information on how to do that doesn't mean that's going to be your first step.
No, I'm going to actually try to change my tire.
Right.
However, I'm going to go into my trunk and I'm going to say, hey, here's a warmer jacket.
Right.
And here's a pair of boots that I can go out into the rain and water with that I'm not going to get my socks wet and get hypothermia or some crap.
Well,
like
and it's
that.
the same thing we talk about with apparel that we've talked about before. Is I've been in situations to where I have better layers than someone next to me, and we're both still getting wet and cold. I'm just a little bit more comfortable. Sometimes that's all it's about, is just being a little bit more comfortable. You want to put those boots on instead of those sneakers because you just will be a little bit less cold. It doesn't mean it's not going to suck. It's still going to suck. It'll just suck a little less.
Yeah, and I mean, really just developing your mindset around those kind of things is important too. And as I mentioned before, not to keep rehashing this, but having familiarity and experience with doing these kind of things will empower you in the long run. So meaning you'll be more confident when some emergency happens, you'll be more level-headed, you'll be able to use your head in a better way. It's a whole mindset thing. You'll understand what's happening in a room more because you've thought about it. You know to sit with your back to a wall and you know where the exits are. Like it's an all-encompassing way to look at your life, in my opinion. And it's not anything we invented. However, I also feel like distilling it into these things and really focusing on these skills in themselves and particular skills is something that the world needs and that we're providing. So that's what ITS is. So that's kind of what I say to somebody every time I talk to them. Obviously,
right?
I go into a 20 minute.
Long.
Just hang on a second. I got a script here. Well, we do.
You screwed up. Take this binder. Follow along.
Yeah, knowledge and tools is the big thing, man.
Yeah.
It's imminent threat solutions, knowledge and tools to get you through that stuff.
Yep.
So anything that comes your way. All right, thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have questions you would like us to answer, use the pound tag Gear Tasting, and we'll talk about them on the show or our Questions Over Coffee episodes that also appear on YouTube as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, how's it going? We have this as well. If you're listening to a podcast, just know that we have this on YouTube for video if you would like to see us talk amongst ourselves. And also, check out our Crew Leader membership. It's in the episode intel for each of these episodes. And that's our membership for the site. It allows you to help support us, but allows us to give you back something in return, too. So there's cool store discounts and little perks and benefits, and I think you'll like it. Also, we would really love your subscription on Apple Podcasts, and the reviews really do help. So the reviews and ratings are huge in terms of other people finding our show. So keep it up. Thanks for your support.